So yeah, wait. Let me share my screen.
I'll stop sharing right now.
Okay, wait. Let me know if it goes through because at times my Zoom is really weird. So not entirely sure. Okay. Okay, so everybody can see the screen, just making sure. Okay. So this will be a weighing lecture. For those that don't know, weighing is just fundamentally why your argument is more important through the others through like some specific considerations, and we'll go through those considerations. The reason weighing is important is because in a round where both people win their cases, it's really hard for the judge to decide which one should be preferred. So weighing is the extra thing to decide which one is more important and which should be like more specified, included, like etc. First, I wanted to do like a quick poll in the chat just to make sure what y'all wanted to focus on. Would y'all want me to focus on like more of the fundamentals of debate, more specific weighing, topic analysis specific to your resolution, or more drills? Just let me know in the chat which of those three, and if we get like somewhat of a consensus, just so we can like space the time better for y'all. I'll wait like a little bit for everybody to type in the chat. Okay, we got one for topic analysis. If Joy is the only one that answers, I guess we're gonna go with topic analysis. So okay, yeah, I guess we'll go with topic analysis. So first and foremost, we're gonna go through a little bit of the fundamentals. Weighing happens in multiple levels, specifically in impact level on like what your argument is, what your argument impacts out to, like nuclear war, economy, poverty, stuff like that. Link weighing specific to you winning your link and the probability of your link actually happening. And meta weighing is doing comparative weighing between what you are saying on the weighing page and what they're saying. So first and foremost, let's get into impact weighing. Impact weighing. So these are the main types of impact weighing. The first and the one that is probably going to be used the most, at least on the American circuit, is magnitude weighing. Magnitude weighing basically explains how much does it hurt, or like specifically how many people die, injured, etc. For example, if nuclear war kills 5 billion people, you would always go, and this outweighs on magnitude because X people are dead. Right? Or if on the economy page you say that like 30 million people are in poverty and they only have an impact that impacts 1 million people, you say that we outweigh on magnitude because you have a lot bigger of an impact, right? And specifically, those impacts hurt more people. Scope and magnitude are kind of intrinsically linked because one says how many people are like affected and other one is like a specific number. So scope is just another number on like how much comparatively somebody is hurt or not. For example, if like somebody if like 2 people died in a scenario versus like 30 people dying, you could say like this has higher scope, right? But magnitude and scope are basically the same, almost like the same thing, like in most scenarios. But like magnitude is probably like the best representation. Secondly is like probability weighing, or how likely it is to happen. This is also probably used like just as much as magnitude weighing. Probability weighing is really specific, like if you have something about poverty versus nuclear war probably isn't the most probable scenario, or like democratic collapse might not be the most probable scenario, while poverty and things that are happening right now in the status quo are the most probable, right? So when you weigh on probability, you're explaining why your impact is the most likely to happen. The next one is time frame. It's more just like when does it actually happen and when should it actually occur. For example, on this topic, if you're arguing about conditions versus other conditions on like aid or something else, you could use a time frame argument on like the unconditional side, right? Because maybe conditions take more time to set in, and through that, people don't get the aid they need and people die, right? So you can say we outweigh on time frame because it takes a lot longer with conditional aid, and that means that people die as a result of that, right? So those are just like arguments that you can make. These two things are basically you can like think of it as like turns on an impact layer. Or a link-in is basically that your argument happens before their argument, or like your argument makes their argument happen. Like, for example, if you say that conditional aid or like unconditional aid leads to democratic collapse, you can say that we link in, or we're a prerequisite, or like you like link in because democratic collapse usually leads to economic crises and increases poverty, right? It's how your scenario can link to theirs and how your scenario can impact theirs. Another prerequisite is like a prerequisite and Lincoln are kind of similar, and it's just that like your case must happen before theirs because it affects X amount of people and can cause your impact, right? So an example on this topic could be yesterday I heard a pandemics argument, right? About conditional aid or unconditional aid is necessary to like prevent pandemics, right? A prerequisite would be pandemics happen and like pandemics shut down the global economy and increase democratic failure as people aren't able to get out and vote. That's a prerequisite because if pandemics happen, it decreases the ability for people to engage in democracy, right? You see how like one argument can easily affect like other arguments? Okay. If everybody in the chat could give me like a thumbs up if that makes sense, that would be good. And also like feel free anybody to just like ask questions in between because yeah, it's important. The next is like link weighing. Link weighing is a bit more like nuanced, specifically like how your evidence measures versus their evidence, or how you specifically compare. First is link comparison. Sometimes people have like the same links into democracy or like other things or like other impacts, right? So you just want to show why your link is more probable or your link is better. For example, if you're saying that conditional aid prevents corruption, but they say that unconditional aid helps restore democracy, they'll both have like links into the same impact. So link comparison is basically explaining why one comes before the other. Warrant comparison is just like why your warrants make more sense or why your explanation into the impact is just like better, right? And that's pretty easy to like understand. A lot of people do this without knowing it, but it's just explaining why your argument is like better than theirs on like more of a weighing level or like your link into your impact. Lastly is evidence comparison. A lot of the times evidence comparison doesn't really happen. I'm not really sure the norms in China. I'm not sure if like evidence exchange is really that big, but a good thing you can do is just critique their evidence or critique their analysis. For example, if they read evidence from like 1998, you could say things have changed in those like 20 years, right? We've had revisions, we've had X amount of things, which is why our evidence is better, right? Doing that analysis on like why your evidence should be preferred gives a judge a reason on why your argument should be preferred over theirs, right? And why your link into X impact or your argument against them is a lot better than theirs, right? These are a few things that you can use. Dates. I'm not sure if y'all read author qualifications, but these are just some of the things. Usually dates are probably like the place where you get people the most. So, lastly is meta weighing. Meta weighing is actually like really, really important because like, for example, if somebody does a lot of magnitude weighing and somebody does a lot of probability weighing, but they don't explain why one is more important than the other, it leaves a judge in kind of a weird position, right? For example, if you said democratic collapse because X essential and hurts like X amount of people, but somebody says that poverty is happening right now and it's a lot more probable, right? Both of those are probably true. So it's up to the judge to make the comparative, right? Instead, what all of you should be doing is doing meta weighing, right? Meta weighing is basically like a form of analyzing and comparing your impacts, right? So the impact calculus I just explained of like magnitude, scope, probability, time frame, those also in like a nuanced way have to be compared to each other. For example, one example is nuclear war versus poverty. If I was going on nuclear war against poverty, I would say on like a level that magnitude should be preferred over probability, because we must look at the worst case impacts, because if everybody dies, we can't look at any other scenario, right? But if I was on the poverty scenario weighing probability against magnitude, I would say high magnitude impacts happen, or like high magnitude impacts never actually happen and they never materialize. Instead, we should focus on impacts that are already happening in the here and now that we can solve, right? See how I'm doing the comparative analysis between like one impact scenario and the other impact scenario, which can like help everybody. Okay. These are just some of the other ones. But I think y'all probably get the gist. If anybody wants to type in the chat that they want more of this, it's just basically weighing one impact versus the other. And I think it's pretty like easy to do. Like once y'all get in the hang of it. So on like a weighing level specifically, what y'all should be thinking of in like summary and final focus is explaining why your specific arguments are more important than theirs, using the impact calculus of how much does it hurt, how much does it hurt, how much more people are affected, how probable is it, what like the time frame on it is, and how does it link to their arguments. You then want to do some comparative analysis on like your evidence or like your links, and then you want to compare why your impact calculus is better than theirs, usually in the final focus. The framing, I'm not sure if framing is really a big thing on your circuit or your norms, but a lot of times people use framing or specific ways of framing the resolution to like benefit them, or like confines that you set, right? So structural violence is a form of framing in which you prefer like low magnitude, high probability impacts that impact marginalized and low income communities or people that like are hurt the most, right? For example, poverty is probably a structurally violent impact, or like racism, things like that, which hurt people, right? Versus extinction, which is like everybody dies. We should prefer like a utilitarian calculus on saving the most amount of people. So a good debate that this could get into is if you want to frame yourself that you read that extinction is really, really important, and then you read like a war scenario, or you read a democracy scenario. Or what you could do is if you're reading a poverty scenario or a specific scenario that hurts like marginalized communities, you could read structural violence. A lot of these things just give you more analysis and preemptive weighing, which could help you. Okay. I think this is where we're gonna focus on like a little bit more, because that's what like y'all wanted. So we're gonna do a little bit more like topic specific analysis. So I'm gonna like slowly go through each individual impact with y'all that like probably will be a little bit like bigger on the topic. So first and foremost, starting with colonialism. I think colonialism could be like a very big argument in the round, because it's just the idea of like Western nations and Westphalian ideals being pushed upon other like people. For example, when political conditions and considerations are pushed on countries as a means of aid, that can hurt everybody, right? Because that it like injects like imperialist norms. Ways in which you can weigh colonialism in this scenario is a probability. You say that colonialism is infinitely probable because it's happened in the past and will happen in the future. Empirical precedent is on the side of like is on the side of the affirmative, I believe. Yeah, the affirmative in this scenario. And through that, unconditional aid should be given. So A is probability. B is probably like a prerequisite that colonialism justifies worse impacts. Colonialism is basically like Western intervention, right? So when colonialism happens, people get angry. This can lead to conflict, and this could lead to like multiple other impacts, right? So it's explaining that colonialism is like a root cause, or like leads to a bunch of other impacts, right? So on colonialism proper, you could say A, it's really, really probable, and B, it leads to tons of other impacts, meaning that solving for colonialism and preventing colonialism to these people is like better, right? Secondly is like conflict. A thing that could be used as like aid is necessary to end conflict, or like aid is needed. So conflict you can probably weigh like very differently in different scenarios, but one way you could weigh it is just like magnitude on that conflict kills a lot of people, and a lot of people are affected, right? And that's probably the easiest analysis. B is probably on another prerequisite, the conflict leads to other impacts, right? A lot of times you're going to pick like one impact or one form of weighing, and then you're going to pick like a prerequisite argument, right? And through that, like you'll get more analysis and stuff. Does everybody understand that? Okay. I'm gonna start like calling on like random people so to participate now. So let's get started. Selena, let's say that you are given an impact of like infrastructure, right? What are some ways that you would explain that aid is necessary to create infrastructure for people? Like what weighing mechanisms would you use? Ooh, tough crowd. Let's see. Uh, Joy, same question.
What? I think I just misheard the last word. So is it about evidence comparison or impact weighing or meta weighting?
So yeah, this is probably like impact weighing. So it's explaining like specifically how would you, if you had an impact of infrastructure, how would you weigh it?
Well, I think I weighted what's infrastructure? I thought I just forget it just at a moment.
So yeah, like infrastructure is if like they're building like waterways, they're building
Oh yeah,
buildings.
yeah, yeah. I think I'll just weigh the impact like is probability and its scope. So it's like how many does it hurt and how likely is it?
Yeah, that's really, really good. I think that's probably the best way to weigh it. That
Oh,
infrastructure
thanks.
affects, yeah, infrastructure affects the most amount of people because it affects like everyone in that specific place, right? And by creating infrastructure, it's the most probable way to like help those people, right? Or specifically, like aid has done it in the past and will do it in the future. I think something that will like help everybody is there's something called empirics, or it's this like precedent or the past. Using the past to fuel your own probability weighing is really, really important, right? Because like the reason for probability is that's the most likely to happen, right? And the way you dictate what is likely is by looking to the past to dictate the future, right? So always try to reference previous examples or like reasons that it has helped people in the past to explain why it is probable and how it impacts people, right? Um, let's see, let me cross. So Roger, if you were to weigh the economy or like some like example of poverty, how would you do impact weighing on that?
Uh, Perhaps. What are we weighing it against?
Say that you're economy versus democracy.
Probability?
So why is economy like why is an economy impact probable?
Because I think economy and democracy affects like everyone in the country, right? But then I'm not too sure actually. They're very similar. Maybe just on magnitude.
Yeah, so I see that I'm like giving y'all like really, really vague scenarios. So like it's totally okay that y'all don't like know like specifics, right? But some things when you're thinking about the economy, probability was like definitely the right answer. I was just asking like why you think that, right? So I think probability is like a good way to weigh the economy because we know that it can help people and it's like a likely form of implementation. In the past, foreign humanitarian aid has been used to benefit the economy, bringing people out of poverty and helping economic conditions, right? That's a way that you could do probability weighing like really, really easily, right? As you explained that in the past it has happened and has continued to help people. B is on like I think like a magnitude perspective. Because you could say like it affects like a lot or like a magnitude scope perspective that affects a lot of people. Lastly, I think an argument that like a lot of people should make is like a prerequisite argument, right? That when you fuel the economy, you decrease the conditions for democratic collapse. You increase the ability for people to prosper, right? And when you create those conditions, all other impacts decrease, right? When the economy is like better, corruption probably decreases among the populace, or like stuff like that, right? Making arguments on why your impact specifically like helps, right? So if you were weighing econ versus democracy, what you can say is that when economic collapse happens, democracies also collapse. That's why aid is needed to fuel the economy, because the economy is the only way to like assure that like democracy stays in place, right? You see how I use your argument and your impact to like fuel another impact. Roger, do you got that?
Yep.
Okay, so if you were to weigh democracy versus the economy, what would you say?
Magnitude or scope?
And why is that?
Because democracy affects everyone in the country, while economy perhaps is more beneficial many times for like the richer companies, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very good argument to make. So yeah, like democracy affects everybody, it'll impact everybody, and the impacts of like a bad democracy will probably also impact like a lot of people, right? So I think that's a smart argument to make. Just always be looking for reasons that democracy should be preferred over the other impact, right? Like prerequisite arguments or Lincoln arguments on why democracy is better or leads to like bad economic conditions, right? You could say that when democracy collapses, the economy collapses, or that like when democratic values are down, people don't like leave the country, which like hurts the economy, right? See those types of arguments that you can make to like prereq or like decrease their impact or like mitigate the impact. Okay. Let's see. Isabella, if you were to weigh human rights, how would you weigh human rights? Okay. Let's see. Vivian, how would you weigh human rights?
Against what?
Let's say democracy.
Human rights against democracy. I'll say like if like there if there's like if human rights are protected, then democracy is achieved.
Yes, that's a really, really good argument, right? It's that democracy cannot exist without human rights, right? Like human rights is a tenet of democracy. So the way you would explain that is a prerequisite argument, right? We need to assure human rights before we can ever engage in democracies, right? So I think that was really, really smart. I think another thing is like on the impacts that are already happening or that are like going to happen to people, like human rights, like infrastructure, like colonialism, always make some form of probability weighing, because we know like without it, or like probably because of your link scenario, that it's more probable to happen, right? So rather than impacts like war or like hegemony, democratic collapse, arguments like human rights should definitely be probability based. Okay. Does everybody let's see, let's pick somebody. Chris, let's weigh, can you weigh hegemony versus the economy?
What's hegemony, by the way?
Okay, yeah, that's actually probably a good thing to discuss. So hegemony is like powers, like great powers like the US, like China, like Russia. They all play a specific role in like the geopolitical sphere, or, like the ways in which people like have power, right? So China has a lot of power, like economic and militarily, and so does the US. So hegemony is a concept of who controls power, right? So a big argument, at least on the US circuit, is like US hegemony, right? And like what will happen if the US loses hegemony or like loses power to an external like power, right? Like Russia or China or any other person, right? So hegemony is like if the US increases their military presence in a certain place, they assert their hegemony, which increases their power, right? But if they allow Russia to increase their power in like the Arctic or like West Asia, that decreases the US's hegemony, which can lead to like bad impacts like war, poverty, stuff like that. Do you understand that, Joy?
Sure, thanks.
Okay. Chris, are you there? Okay. Let's see. Huey, let's how about how would you weigh hegemony versus the economy? Okay, let's see. Let's see. Person in the call on yet. Jagger, how would you weigh hegemony versus the economy?
I think if I weighed like hegemony against the economy, I would say that just kind of hegemony is like much more uh um oh, okay, so I think that I would say, well, hegemony is basically quite a very 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 like dangerous action, and I think that hegemony actually affects the whole the whole country and the whole nation, I guess. And I think that I would also say that, well, there are like quite a lot of like issues with like the whole with the whole like nation, I guess. And I don't think that economy is quite going to be quite important, because like hmm, uh
Yeah, I think you're definitely on the right track that like hegemony is bigger, it affects a lot of people, right? And that like the economy is not as like important per se as like the economy, right? Like for example, like if the US or like a power loses hegemony or if people are in like a power struggle, that supersedes the economy, right? Because it could lead to war, it could lead to like a lot of things, right? Another argument that you could make is that when hegemony, like when people engage in like great power battles or like when they engage in trade wars versus each other, the economy suffers, right? Which means that solving for hegemony is a prerequisite to ever having a good economy. For example, like when the US engaged in a trade war versus China, or like vice versa, both the I think like economy suffered, right? So like through that, that's like an example. Yeah, I think there's some other there's some other impacts I had a little bit later. Yeah, so pandemics. How would somebody weigh pandemics versus say colonialism or democracy? Let's say democracy. Let's see, Isabel. Okay. Nemo. Okay. Wait, can everybody who's like active text in the chat so I know who's like active? Like really quick.
Colonialism versus what?
Like let's say colonialism versus pandemics. Okay, Chenglin, how about you do pandemics versus colonialism? Also, if I'm pronouncing your names wrong, please let me know and I'll like fix it. Yeah.
Pandemics versus colonialism.
Yeah.
Well, but I think they're both an affirmative like case. I think they're both on like how do you weigh things?
Okay, so let's think of a negative example. So like a negative example could be like corruption, right? So let's have you weigh pandemics versus corruption per se, or like economy corruption.
Pandemics affects like the economy because people like especially like in manufacturing and production, which increases the incentive for corporations to corrupt because they're having like less profit.
That's really, really good. Yeah. That's exactly what like you should be looking for in a weighing analysis. How like your argument has to come before theirs because it affects them, right? That's a prerequisite, right? That's a really good argument. I think the argument for pandemics always should be magnitude, affects a lot of people. The example is stuff like COVID-19, which shut down the global economy, killed millions and affected like people's livelihoods, right? Through that, it could increase the ability for corruption because poor people are hurt while rich people like are able to like prosper better, which could like increase like inequality disparities, like stuff like that. So there's like a lot of stuff you can do there. But I think that argument is like really, really good. Okay, does anybody have any questions on like a weighing analysis or any specific impacts they want to cover? Like yesterday I saw like a debate about specific conditions versus like political conditions, or like specific means versus political conditions, that I think was like a really cool argument. And I think that you can also use weighing not only for like contentions, but like those types of arguments. So does anybody have any specific like questions about their case? Yeah, totally. Even if you don't understand, please ask. And I'll like be happy to answer anything. But yeah, does anybody have anything specific to their own cases or like anything like that? Okay, yeah, Joy.
So what's the impact of human rights on this motion? So I don't quite understand. So is human rights about how many people will be affected?
So yeah, like an example of human rights is that in states with unconditional aid could be given, and that doesn't help human rights, right? Those people, aid could be given to dictators that like use their money to be corrupt officials, and through that human rights are hurt. Or an example on the conditional side could be said that the US or other countries impose political conditions on policymaking, usually to like affect and increase like human rights. For example, in African nations, Western countries have been seen to like give aid conditionally with the obligation of democratic and human rights like values, right? Those policies increase human rights and the ability for people to prosper. Like somewhat of an example of like human rights is like women's employment in the workspace increases in like conditional states, or like the ability for people to like not have child labor. Like those types of things are examples of human rights that could be like a contention on either side. Does that answer your question, Joy?
Sure, thanks.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I can answer questions like specific to your cases too. Because y'all probably know the topic like better than I do. Okay. I guess after like hearing me talk for like a while, let's try to get more into like actual engagement, actual drills instead of just like hearing my like voice. So we're gonna do a little bit of like a drill, like a little bit of a weighing tournament for y'all. And I think it could be like really fun. So let's get into it. Okay. So basically the format is I'm gonna like tally everybody that just said that they're active or can like use their mic. And I have a list of like eight to 10 specific like arguments that could apply on this case. I'll try to sound like an AF argument and a neg argument, and y'all are gonna like weigh versus each other, right? We're probably a little bit running out of time, so probably not 3 minutes of prep, probably like a little bit less. But yeah, here I'm gonna start giving out anything. Does anybody want a specific impact like before we start? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna start assigning people to stuff. And the list that I send it will be like the order in which like people go against, right? Okay, this is gonna be the first matchup. It's gonna be Joy on democracy versus Roger with the economy. Joy and Roger, do you guys both know like how the weighing tournament like specifically works and like what y'all have?
So I'm having democracy.
Yes. And
So
Roger,
what's the impact of democracy on this motion? So I don't think like to have like the motion and democracy have links. I don't think so.
I think there's a few places in which democracy can happen. For example, on conditional aid packages, a political condition that can be imposed is like for policymaking or for some specific conditions, you like increase democracy. For example, in the negative I heard yesterday, Mozambique and Niger were both examples in which democracy saw significant increases as a product of conditional aid, right? Those are an example of how conditional aid packages can help increase democratic values, right? Do you understand the link
Oh.
on the motion now?
Sure.
Okay. Roger, do you have your impact? Like you're good?
For economy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So once I finish giving everybody their things, then y'all will like go first. Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. So are we just gonna like give a speech on how our issue outweighs their issue?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. And it's just gonna like give y'all practice on using what we already talked about. Specifically like the first time you're giving it like your first speech, that's 1 minute is gonna be more about like the impact weighing, and the second speech is gonna be more about like the meta weighing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just making sure. Chris, are you active? Just like unmute and say something if you are. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick right now, so. Okay. I guess not. So let's do. Okay. That's the second matchup. Let's see. Kiwi, are you active? Okay, I'm gonna take it as a no. Vivian, are you active? Just unmute or type in the chat if you are. Okay, got you. Selena, are you active?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't know how to answer the question, so.
Okay, got it. Let's see. Um, Chenglin, are you active?
Yeah.
Let's do colonialism. Okay. Anybody that hasn't gone to matchup that wants to get a matchup, please unmute and let me know. I've got Isabel, Jagger, oh, Chris, are you active? I think no, I just asked that. Never mind. Roger. Yeah, I think I got everybody who's active. So or like that can use their mic too. Okay. So first let's start with Joy versus Roger. Are y'all ready to go?
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So Joy, you're gonna be going first with democracy, basically explaining why democracy is important with the 1 minute speech.
Sure, I think I'll time myself. Wait, where's the timing? But I'll just wait till a minute have passed. Okay, for sure. So I think in this motion, democracy outweighs the economy because we're actually on the stage of the people affected, which is the scope, like how many does it hurt? Well, I think that democracy is a kind of something like policy, and it can hurt a lot of people. If all people, yeah, it is in a society, so it can hurt a lot of people. And also the probability. I think that when the humanitarian aid is given, well, there is a great probability or even 100% probability about the political issues. Like sometimes sometimes the humanitarian aid will be taken away by the government, and there's also need to be political decisions about how we should decide to give it to the people or to give it to the government, because government can make better decisions. So it's 100% of democracy decisions could happen. So I think in this motion we should weight democracy more instead of weighting economy more. Thank you.
Okay. Roger, now it's you.
Okay, so in this debate, you should be voting economy over democracy for two reasons. Firstly, on probability, and on the prerequisite that we tell you that a stable democracy requires for economy to grow, right? We tell you that there's multiple cases in the world, whereas we are trying to establish democracies around the world, but they ultimately fail because of a collapsing economy. And not only so, you should also be voting for this on magnitude, because we tell you that economy affects everyone from top to bottom in the country, whilst democracy is only prioritized by like the lower working class people and perhaps the middle class people. So for all these reasons above,
Okay. So now, Joy, it's your turn to give like a 30-second speech on like comparing the two.
Sure. Well, comparing about those both, well, as I just said, democracy can affect a lot of people, and even most of the society will be affected. That means that if you're out of this country, well, it can affect all the people. However, economy, well, sometimes economy just belongs to someone who is poor. As for those who is rich and they have more money, so it doesn't matter if the humanitarian aid is given by them or not, because they have enough money to maintain their life. This is my speech, and this is the reason why democracy outweighs the economy in this motion. Thank you.
Okay, Roger, your 30-second speech.
as I've mentioned above, a stable economy and a stable economy is the prerequisite for democracy. Therefore, all of our opponents' positive benefits of democracy should be counted as impact under our side, because we have the only way to make it possible.
Okay. Yeah, that was really, really good from both of you. That's really, really great. I think that was really, really good. Basically, the prerequisite is probably the place that I vote. The prerequisite says that like a stable economy is necessary to like having a good democracy. I think that was a really, really smart response, clearly explaining that like we need an economy to even have a democracy. I think on Joy's side, the scope weighing is really, really good. That democracy affects everybody in a society, and will affect everybody on all levels, right? I think that argument is like really perceptive, and like really, really good. I think both of y'all took both of the impact weighing like to heart. I think just make sure to weigh, like Joy, make sure to weigh why scope should become before their prerequisite, or why scope should become before probability, right? Make that comparative analysis. Okay. Moving on to the next team. Isabel with pandemics and Jagger with human rights. So Isabel, are you ready?
Yes. So I'm just gonna first do like how pandemics are so bad, and I'm also gonna do an impact weighing on my second speech. So do we have a timer? Do we need a time?
I can time it.
Okay, like how long is it?
1 minute. 1 minute for the first one, 30 seconds for the second one.
Okay, so time starts now. Firstly, pandemics have an unparalleled ability to spread rapidly across borders and continents. While admitting that human rights are important, we must also agree to the fact that pandemics harm human rights unprecedentedly, but pandemics also harm other things more important than human rights. Therefore, pandemics not only harm human rights, they also harm the ability of us to live, which is the basic human right that everyone corresponds to. Therefore, pandemics are much worse than human rights. For instance, pandemics spread very fastly. This explosional spread overwhelms healthcare systems, leading to a shortage of medical resources and personnel. This can lead to job losses, which is also a fundamental human right. Hospitals are stretched to their limits, making it difficult to provide adequate care to patients, thereby increasing mortality rates. The lethality of certain pandemics further compounds their severity. For instance, like the Spanish flu of 1918, the high transmission rates and the virulence of these pathogens make them particularly dangerous, sparing no age group and affecting vulnerable populations more severely. Another human right the pandemic's effect would be school. Everyone has the right to go to school. However, pandemics harm this right because people going to school has fear of actually being gone with this pandemic. Therefore, we believe that pandemics are more important than human rights. Thank you.
Okay, Jagger, are you ready?
Yeah. Right. It's 1 minute, right?
Yep.
Okay, sure. Wait a sec. Let me find my timer. Time will start in 3, 2, and firstly, we think that this human rights impact is much more bigger than pandemic for 2 reasons as well. Firstly, we think that even though this pandemic is actually spreading very fastly and very hard to control, we think that this is happening on a very short-term basis. These pandemics actually occur in the short term, while we actually, human rights actually go in the long term. Why? 2 reasons why. Firstly, we'll tell you that when pandemics actually occur, there's a very long time that leads to another pandemic. That time is very peaceful. But compared to human rights, what does human rights cause us? They are very not temporary. There are a lot of incidents happening around the whole world non-stop. And this amount is large because it's actually going against, for example, there are also a lot of crimes such as sexual violence, assault, etc., etc. So you think that these impacts actually kill people on a bigger basis, or actually harm people's mental and physical health, rather than a pandemic where the pandemics actually happen on a very short-term basis.
Really good. Okay. Now Isabel, 30-second second speech.
Okay. So just ready? Wait, let me just get my timer. 30 seconds is a bit hard to time, sorry. Wait. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yep. Time starts in 3, 2, 1. Now, our points to two wings. Firstly, short term, yes, long term. They believe that our impact is only short term. However, Judge, let me remind you that people killed by pandemics are certainly a permanent impact. They are not coming back. The second impact weighing our opponents do is people killed by COVID, yes, people killed by human rights. Firstly, we believe that sure, human rights kill people. However, most certainly not on a space as pandemic. Let's just take COVID, right? We're not even talking about SARS, just COVID. It's killed 6 million people or so. That's a common issue. This is why we believe that pandemics outweigh human rights. Thank you.
Okay. Next speech.
Yeah, sure. I'll just start. Compared to pandemics, although we agree pandemics actually kill people on a very larger basis, we think that human rights actually occur in a very mass effect. We think that this effect is much more larger than these pandemics. We don't see how actually these pandemics kill more people because these medicines can be used to cure all of these patients, all of their diseases, all of their physical and mental health, all of their issues. We think that human rights is permanently long lasting, but mentally and physically. So that's why we have two main impacts here that arguments have actually not been rebutting it. That's mentally and physical. That's all.
Really, really good from both of you. I thought that was like the impact weighing was really good on both sides. I think the analysis that pandemics are permanent because it kills people is really, really good, right? Because it takes out the time frame weighing by explaining that death is permanent, right? And that when you die, it's irreversible. I also think the explanation that human rights leads to physical and mental damage that lasts forever is also really, really good, right? So independently, it probably both comes down to like a magnitude analysis on how many people are actually affected, right? And I think the pandemics argument does a really, really good job of that. Isabel does a really, really, really good job of that. I think that Jagger, you do a really, really good job on the time frame weighing. I thought it was really, really smart to do the short term versus long term stuff. And just remember to add the like the word time frame, right? And I think that was really, really good. Okay, next. Let's do Selena poverty versus Chenglin colonialism.
So I got kind of like 1 minute to talk about it.
Yes. So you have 1 minute to talk about poverty.
Okay, so first, like I'm gonna say like why poverty will have a bigger impact than colonialism is that actually poverty it has three types, like first is cyclic and collective, and also the third one is concentrated collective poverty. And then like these three kinds, like one is maybe for short term and one is for like a long term, and then like collective. But colonization, it is well, I think it is reversible. So colonization, maybe it will only exist for short term while kind of like, and then it's yeah, it takes place. But poverty, to be honest, it has a wider region like where it happens, and then actually it is much harder to reverse than a colonization. So which means that the impact and then will last longer than it, and then it's harming more people. It's kind of like, oh sorry, like it's kind of like, and then it's also, and also I want to say that poverty is affected by a lot of reasons. It's like maybe they don't get enough resources and they don't get enough maybe space for agriculture, and then they have slow developing process for economy, and then these things cannot be solved so easily, and then will also impact for the next generation. So you can see that now in the world there are still a lot of places where that is still in poverty, like India or a lot of African countries, but now left in the world you can see that there's much less problems left in the colonialism. And then I think it's easy to see, or we can probably assume that these poverty problems will probably last maybe to the even next decades, or will last for decades long. So it's first, why it's bigger impact, I think you can conclude, and so that it has more region involved in this problem, and then it is kind of much harder to solve, and also it will impact the future generation. So all in all, we get a bigger impact.
Okay. Chenglin, are you good to go?
Yep.
Okay. I think Selena did a little bit more than 1 minute, so you can have like a minute and 20 seconds.
Okay, my time can start now. Neocolonialism is enabling violation and structural violence against the third world, which oftentimes takes the prerequisite in this debate because it pushes people into poverty. Two aspects that I want to focus. First aspect is on World Trade Organization. For the poor countries to be engaged in trade, you have to sign to the World Trade Organization, and which means you also need to sign to the TRIPS agreement, which is established in 1993, that increases patent and intellectual property protections, enforcing neo-colonial powers, but allowing Western corporates to set up higher prices for whether drug prices or seed prices and stuff. Which means people in the third world either A, die because, which is a terminal impact because they cannot afford the drug, or B, they fall into poverty because drug has an inelastic demand and people need these drugs for their survival, which means we take the prerequisite here. But second of all, second aspect is on the IMF, World Bank, and all these Bretton Woods institutions where the global hegemony governs and takes much of their vote. These neoliberal policies means opening up to the Western market and diminishing protectionism for local industries. In Mozambique, for example, IMF-induced policies decreased tariffs for local industries, meaning that these industries are becoming less competitive and falling into a vicious cycle. As a result, Mozambique's cashew industry is wrecked, pushing 10,000 people into poverty. Again, this is why colonialism takes prerequisite.
Okay, Selena, 30 seconds.
Okay, like wait a minute, I need to find a timer to time myself. So okay, my time starts now. So first I want to say that like my opponent, he admitted himself that colonial well, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but colonialism is one cause that push people into poverty. So you admitted yourself that this is a kind of poverty, but as I have said in my first speech, is that poverty is caused by a lot of other reasons, and then this is maybe only one cause of it. So actually my impact involves yours and your impact can become mine. So, you know, so all in all, like we have a bigger impact, like I have a bigger impact.
Okay. Next speech.
Okay, time can start now. First of all, on severity and magnitude, we tell you that we outweigh because oftentimes the third world countries often rely on one single industry of production, meaning that neocolonialism ruining one single industry, for example, in Mozambique, is often means that you're putting like the major workforce into poverty. But listening to her speech, she tells us that okay, poverty is permanent. We tell you that it's neocolonialism that's making it more permanent because we see in China when China is only reliant upon their own industry, we see how China has been like alleviating poverty for like 10 years, but other countries in the third world, such as these African countries, we see how they're like contingent upon these Western neocolonialism, like they stick to the like these neocolonial agenda, and this is why the reason they're like being stuck into poverty.
Really, another really good thing. I thought that speech was great. I think the prerequisite on the colonialism page that neocolonialism increases the amount of poverty because it reduces trade and increases prices was really good. I also think, Selena, you explaining that there's multiple forms of poverty and poverty impacts like a larger amount of people is good. I eventually think like severity and magnitude on like the impact of neocolonialism specifically probably outweighs a more like generalized poverty in this specific scenario. But both of y'all did really good, and like the improvements were really like great. I think things to remember for everybody is three things. One is remember to use like specific language, and when you use that language like be like more organized about it. For example, some people go like back and forth between like magnitude and a prerequisite and probability. Be very organized and structured in the way in which you state them. For example, if you say there's three specific ways that we're going to weigh this, A is probability. Explain probability there, then don't mention it until if you go to another subpoint, right? Have it structured and have it organized. B is meta weighing. Make sure that you go and weigh your prerequisite against their magnitude. For example, in this debate, Chenglin did a really good job of explaining how his colonialism impact subsumed all of their magnitude impacts, because he says that the prerequisite happens first and actually causes the said so poverty, right? So just remember to weigh against them specifically. It's more like a rebuttal against their weighing. Another thing is just when you're reiterating responses, a lot of times is especially in like the final speeches, go for one specific form of weighing that's really good. For example, if you're going for like a nuclear war argument, or like in this case, let's say you're going for a poverty argument, you could say poverty reproduces systems of violence and reproduces systems of economic collapse in which everybody is injured, right? Those specific things can like be used like time and time again, right? I think a really smart thing for a lot of you to do before going to China Nationals is to pre-write some weighing for each of your contentions. So use the impact calculus I gave you before and just think, like we were thinking about weighing hegemony versus the economy, and like pre-write some of that stuff so you have it prepared, right? And I think that could help everybody. Does anybody have any more questions to like finish it off, anything that they want to talk about their own case, or like anything like specifically? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Thank y'all for listening to me for like the past hour. I know that like lectures can be like tough like a lot of the time, and sometimes it hurts listening to them, but I think the impact weighing and learning weighing will definitely help everybody, and could be like really beneficial, especially in all of y'all's futures. So yeah, probably giving it back to Justine now.
All right. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for your time. That was really great. I learned a lot too from you. And I think that these like exercises are really great for everyone to learn and to improve. I think it's good that we get like some speaking into. So thank you so much for taking your time. I know it's kind of late over there. It's like, are you in EST? Is it 11 p.m.?
Yeah, it's 11 right now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm sure everyone appreciates it just as much as I do. And with that, our round starts at 11:15. So let me just stop recording really quickly.